right now, this minute, you can go back to any place, any time for genealogy clues. Where would you go? I personally, I dream of this all the time. I miss my great grandmother's attic. It was something I passed the stairs because our bedroom was right next to the stairs. I used to hide on those stairs so I wouldn't get beat when we cut down her roses. You know, little kids need to have roses in their lives too. I cut down a few, but I absolutely knew when I went up there that I was in a very special place. And I bet you do too, as well. And so does Jim and Michael. They have had the luck of being able to actually inventory their ancestral attics. And they're going to share with us some tips on what to do to make sure that you don't make any mistakes and throw away some things that you really should keep. And they're going to do that in a quick start today called Inventorying the Attic. And of course, here on Genealogy Quick Start, we don't just give you one quick start, we have two. And the second one is, oh my gosh, it's one that is in an area that I love, but it's with a subject matter that I never really thought of. Have you ever thought about Muslims fighting in the American Civil War? Well, they did, and it wasn't just one of them. And so we have our special guest, and we call him our special guest alumni because he's been with us before multiple times. He might be the special guest who has been on here more than anyone else. I have to check that out. But Jonathan is a citizen archivist. He is a military specialist. And we are so excited to have him here today to talk about just a sliver of a documentary that his research will be a part of. So today, let's get ready for these two quick starts. But first, I want to remind you, make sure that you follow us on Facebook so that you know when we're putting up new videos. And of course, subscribe on YouTube. And of course, press the bell so that you get notifications whenever we put up new videos. So without further ado, let me bring on my favorite quick starters. Oh, I forgot. Please, 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 if you're out there, let us know you're there. We love to know where you are. And if you are a member of a genealogy group, please represent that group because you never know, there could be some genealogy souls looking to hang out with you. So without further ado, let's bring on my favorite quick starters. First up, columnist and editor James M. Beidler. How are you today, Jim?
I am well.
I'm glad. Thank you for being here. And of course, genealogy tip of the day, Michael John Neal. How are you, Michael?
Well, I've thrown one computer against the wall, and the other one just about went out the window. But otherwise, we're doing pretty good. So
fantastic.
Technology, it is what it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is, but it is our friend, right? Because without that, we wouldn't be together, right?
Point taken. Point taken.
So, Jim, Michael, right now, this minute, you can go back to any time to get any kind of genealogy clues. Like, you guys inspired me. I want to go back to my great-grandmother's attic. Where would you go?
I would be going back to 1723 when the first white people arrived in the area of the Tulpehocken Creek in eastern Lebanon County, western Berks County. I've got scads of ancestors that were among the group that came in the 1720s or groups that came in the 1720s. And I'd just like to see the course of the creeks, the farmsteads start being built along that creek.
How about you, Michael?
Well, I don't want to go back nearly as far, and I didn't see this question, so I'm making up an answer right off the top of my head.
I tried to give you a lot of time to think.
You did give me a little time. I would like to go back to January of 1941 I would like to be somewhere in the recorder's office when my grandparents went in to get their marriage license, because I just think there's something there I'd like to know, and I'd just like to be the old janitor in the corner, messing with the mop, hearing whatever was going on when great grandma and my grandmother went in for her to get permission to get married when she was 16. I just like to have been there to just kind of see whatever
I
happens.
love that. I love that. You're going to make me change my answer, but I'm going to stay in the coziness of my great grandmother's attic, because I know that there are probably some hidden clues up there that, oh my goodness, that I know we have probably lost. So you guys are going to save future attic cleaner outers to help them with some specific tips on how they can do this new quick start that you guys came up with, which is inventorying the attic. And so why is this important to genealogists?
Because if you got a bunch of crap in your attic and you don't do something with it before you leave this earth, it's going to be on the curb on garbage day. Or a lot of it will be. And even if it's not, there may be stories and details about things that don't get preserved. And they might as well be not quite the same as being in the dumpster on Monday, but there are some similarities there. So we want to avoid if we can.
Yeah. It's definitely, you snooze, you lose. And also there are things that might be in need of preservation during your lifetime. Things, especially if it's paper things from the bad paper era, from 1850 to 1950.
Oh,
they
I
might
thought
crumble.
you meant 2000 to 2020 with this disappearing ink on our receipts. I thought that was the bad paper years.
Well, that's
Years.
That's the bad ink era. That's the bad ink
the
era.
bad ink era. Exactly.
So before we get started with this fun quick start, let's first say hi to our quick starters. Hello, Judy. I have missed you, lady. Hello, she's in Chicagoland, Fox Valley, a genealogical society. Welcome. Hello, Kathy Wiseman. Hey, Katie from Philly. Hello, Tammy, and happy anniversary to you there in Atlanta. Hey, Dean Henry from the Philly Burbs. And yes, Dean is a genealogy junkie. So that's why he says several genealogy groups. He can't do all that typing and holding on to his grandkids right now. So Angela Allen, hello from Houston by way of Chicago. Hey, Jean, another genealogy enthusiast from AAGG, Collegeville, Aug's Family Quest Society there in Philly, Aug's Greater Virginia, and the South Carolina Historical Society. Thank you all for being here. It's fantastic having you. So it is time to go up into the attic. So let's go ahead and get started with our quick start inventory in the attic in all its heat. All right. So step one is to create an inventory. So how do you actually, what are the nuts and bolts of how you do this? Then what are the important parts of an inventory?
Well, I'm going to try not to step on the other steps because I tend to have that problem. But one thing, take as best you can, organize it. And when we're at this stage of the game, don't let your sentimentalism and your memories of things overwhelm you to where you don't stay focused on your task. Because for some of us, that can be a huge problem. We start going through these things and the memory starts to remember, which is great, but then we don't get done what we set out to do. So try to avoid getting too bogged down in that. Organize them as best you can, the things that you find, but keep in mind there may be some organizational structure to things that you're not aware of yet. So try to preserve, because you may, I know Jim's got things from different people in different trunks. That's an organizational structure you don't want to lose. Boxes or whatever, you don't want to lose that because that's a clue. But try to organize it a little bit, and then we're going to talk about taking pictures. You might even want to take videos, and then once you've got that done, then you can describe the items and go from there. But I would say pictures would probably be your best start to getting your inventory started.
So when you say create an inventory, you're saying basically like kind of put your stuff into piles first, and then
I would organize it a little bit in piles. That'll just kind of give you some place to get started. And take pictures of everything. And then if you want to take some notes of what things are and describe them, give them titles or whatnot.
Michael, stepping on the steps. Michael.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, you
Let's move on.
You want to write down what these darn things are. That's
Yes,
before you do any pictures, before you do anything else. Write down what you think these things are, and you may or may not be right. But
all right, so let's move on to step 2. So you're going to create an inventory, kind of like set up. I like to do 30-day things, right? What can I do in 30 days? Don't try to like eat the whale. Maybe it's just photos you could do in 30 days, right? So step 2 is to then photograph the objects. All right. So how do you do? You do the photographs. What do you do with those photographs? Walk us through.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna, you could just save them in a digital format along with your written description of the things. But there are softwares out there, that museums use. I believe one's called Past Perfect. And that I have no idea whether they have a stripped down version of that that's affordable for a hobbyist. Another group that is relatively new that I learned about at NGS is artifact.com. It's not spelled with the second A if you try to look that up. But they are all into object preservation. And they're a freemium site where if you just have a few things, you can get a free login. They have pricing plans above that.
Fantastic. Okay, so photograph the objects. You're kind of to me that you're saying kind of create a catalog.
Yeah.
You're kind of creating a catalog of what you have. All right. So then step 3 is to document the history of the object. Now this sounds fun. So give us an example of what you mean here.
This is where you would, the provenance of where you got it, if you know that, whatever you know about the object, even some things that reminded you of, you could include those things. Try to make it clear what you were told from somebody else and what you actually experienced yourself with whatever that object was, just to kind of make it clear what is your memory versus what grandma told you or what somebody told you. I've had a thought about photographing the objects that I'll mention here real quickly. One thing you could do is before you photograph them, make some labels. You could just make them on regular paper and cut them up. You don't have to get fancy. And then when you take your photograph, include the label with the photograph of the object.
Very
that will help
nice.
you later. That would even help somebody else later. If you didn't get all the other things done that you want to do, at least there's a picture with that title or whatever together.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. When you're talking about provenance, I mean, it may be as simple and unsophisticated as just what trunk it was found in or what part of the attic it was found in, because that may have some clues and bearing on its history. With the 7 trunks that I have in my house, they're each traceable to a different either ancestor or collateral relative of mine.
7 trunks.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not going to mention how many storage totes I have, but the other thing with provenance, and Jim mentioned the trunks, and that's a good one. If it's something you remembered sitting on, because I've got a clock that I'm not quite sure how old it is, and the early stories I'm not sure I believe, but the more recent story is my mother remembered her grandmother having it in one room of the house, and I'm pretty sure that's accurate. The other things my grandma told me, I'm a little bit not quite so sure about, but I want to include all of that, because even just that little clue, somebody remembered where it sat, is better than nothing. And sometimes when we hear provenance, people get all, they're fear of academics or semicolons and all that citation. No, just where what you know about it. It doesn't have to be fancy or a lot of detail. Just trunk number 5, and say here's trunk that wasn't.
Love that. Love that. Do you guys out there have any experience with documenting the history of objects? Tell us about it. Because I need to get in that too. Like I have my great Aunt Ida's coffee mug. Not mug. She didn't have a mug. However they made coffee. And that's all I know about it. I need to ask questions about, where it came from, how long did she use it? Was she an avid coffee drinker? Was she just making coffee for Uncle Lewis? That kind of thing. That's really helpful. Thank you. So let's go on to step 4. And then I'm going to show you guys have like really cool stuff. Preserve the item. So maybe let's look at some of these items that you guys have and we can talk about how you preserve them. So I love photographs.
These are one set of my great grandparents, Wellington and Emma Mockmer. And this is especially emblematic of inventorying the attic because some years ago I hadn't cleaned it in a long time. So I went through a major cleaning of the attic and wrapped in a rug on top of a cedar bureau. I'm like, what is this wrapped up in here? Oh my goodness. It was this large portrait that obviously had migrated upstairs to the attic at some point. Well, that is now down in my office room as we speak.
How big is it?
It is a good 2 feet by 3 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The one thing to keep in mind with, I had a lot of pictures, a lot of frames. I got rid of all the frames except for 2, the real big ones that are as big as the one you've got right there. That's something else to think about when you're preserving the item. If it's pictures in big old frames or in big old albums, in terms of conserving space, you might want to think, do I want to keep the frame or the photo album? And sometimes you don't want, especially if the photo album will harm the photographs, so some of them will. This is different, obviously.
Yes.
But that's something to think about too, if you've got something like that.
Yeah, and then this is from a trunk of quilts. Maybe advance one slide, and then we'll come back to this one. This is a trunk that is all quilts, and it's supposedly my great grandmother's, the one that was in the photo. But the quilts are not all hers, because if we go back to that other slide, some of them are marked with the simple monogram of L, as you see in the middle there. That's Luella Emma Frederick, my mother's mother, who was a seamstress by trade. And several of these bear the L insignia.
Amazing. This trunk is incredible.
Yeah.
It looks like it's self-preserved.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything here.
No, that's correct. So now this is another trunk, and I don't know if it was originally my mother's, and it's not a real good photo here, but this is her wedding dress.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah. Which there was a funny incident when I was going through this cleaning with my girlfriend Terry. We were deciding on what things to organize, what things to just trash, what things to do on a yard sale. And she opens this up and she's like, "Oh my!" I'm like, "Yeah, yard sale." She did not react in a pleased manner to that. And yes, I was joking.
Okay, whose teddy is this?
Okay, this is mine, and this falls into the category of things. Are they going to stay preserved past you? Because the sentimental value that I hold for this, other people are not going to hold for this. But
I
this goes
love
back
Teddy.
to fabric, and you want to think about it with the best ways to preserve fabric. You don't want insects and whatever else to get in there. You don't want it to get wet, to get moldy and mildew and things of that type. Similar to how you preserve paper, it likes that environment, so you want to think about that. The picture doesn't show up. There's a tag, so I could approximately date when he was made based on the tag that was on this little guy.
Nice.
So
I
don't know what happened
Teddy.
to his eye.
So do you put him in a bag or something? Like, how do you preserve him?
He's not in a bag right now, but a archival bag of some sort. You want to kind of sometimes be careful with plastic on some of these things.
Okay.
No
Ziplocs. No
Ziplocs, because you want a little air in there. This is a button, and part of, there's no detail about this other than this person with this last name. I say Guy, but you don't know from this if it's, I know it is, but you don't know that. So this is something where if you know some provenance or some more details about it, you'd want to include that, because there's nothing on this except these 3 words. Seriously, I mean.
So is this in the toss pile?
Oh, this is in the keep pile. This is a second or third cousin of my dad's that ran for treasure. He lost every time he ran. But this is a quilt that, boy, this makes a perfect example of when you have the opportunity to identify something with a person who knows what it is, do that, because this was in with my parents' stuff. And I really, at this point, don't even know which side of the family it was from. I just have no. I've seen it before, and I want to say it was my dad's mother's, but I can't.
Oh.
So I've got it, but I have no idea whose it was.
Wow.
So that happens, and to all of us, unfortunately, sometimes. This is a picture. This is a Christmas stocking that my great grandmother made for me that we used we used those until I went to college. We had those hanging up. So it's felt.
Oh, I'm just noticing your M.
yeah. I have one like this. My brother had one exactly like it, except it had a different letter. So that's, this is different from some other things that a person might have, because I know who made this. This wasn't something that was bought at Walmart, or I didn't have those when I was that age, but this wasn't purchased for me. This was something somebody made. So that's something, higher up on my preservation.
Because you know, because
right.
And here's my favorite. Is it coming? It wants to.
Like Teddy said, this bear was made from a chenille bed spread that my
grandmother yes
had. And after my paternal grandmother passed, my mother had these bears made for all of her grandchildren. And there was enough that somehow I ended up with one for each of my children too. My mom and dad had one. The story was this bedspread was out in the garage or the shed on a tractor or a piece of equipment, and after it got done being used in the house, and somebody resurrected it, and so mom had these bears made. I still have leftover blankets from the bears. So this is a different way of preserving something. It has been a little bit altered. It's not in its original form.
No, I love that. So whose bed was this bedspread?
My paternal grandmother had it. I'm assuming on their bed in their bedroom.
That is so awesome. Do your children cherish it?
I think so, yeah, because they don't remember her, but they know who it was, because she died when they were very, very small.
Fantastic. So some tips about preserving things and making some choices and documenting. You guys have step 5, which is to pass items down to family members. So how are you guys doing this? Because I have stuff, but I don't have descendants. And so what do you do then?
I'm still working on that part of this.
It's difficult, to be honest, especially if you have a lot of stuff.
Michael, you can have a museum.
Yeah, that's the problem. And And so you want to find, some of my stuff is going to go to my children, but I'm trying some pictures and whatever. If I know there's a relative more distantly who's interested, they can have it. They can have it.
All
Because
right,
really,
Michael's relatives, start claiming your
seriously,
stuff.
you
Start claiming.
because you can't pass down maybe everything, and so a person you have to think about that. And I think it's good to have family members interact with the items as much as possible. You know, I've got my grandparents' china, and I don't know what's going to happen to that. But I've got an old cook stove that my mother had refinished. I let my daughter have it,
Oh,
and it
nice.
sits in one room, and they put Christmas cookies on it for whatever. But they're building some memories with it, which increases the chance that after I'm gone, they keep it. When something
Yeah.
just sits, people don't want to let it go while they're still alive because they want to have it. I understand that. But if something, if you let them go, that gives the person that you give it to time to become invested in it, which means they're going to be more likely to keep it. Otherwise, it's just more stuff that dad or mom or aunt, whomever, had. It increases the chance that it doesn't get kept. There's no getting people interested is the key, but there's no easy answer to that. Unfortunately,
But that's an excellent strategy, Michael.
I mean,
No, I love that. That is an
the one
excellent
thing that
strategy.
you've got to keep in mind, they might not be interested, and this really hit home when younger daughter, we were driving somewhere, and she's got the 80s station on in the car, which was good. But then a song I really liked, Forever, whatever, came on, and she hit the fast forward button just as soon as she heard the first two beats. And what it meant to me was, I got to keep in mind that what I have a connection to, what ties to me, they're not going to have that same connection to, and you got to get over that and do what you can to try to do the best you can.
Yes, I love that because it's also those memories of our ancestors passing them down. I have cousins that are younger than me, and they never met my great grandma. They didn't have a chance to be with her, but because of the stories they hear about her, she's alive to them. Same with I wasn't around in the 50s or whatever. I have no knowledge of my great, but the stories, I feel like I knew her. So yes, you definitely have to pass those down. Good on you, Michael. I love that. Um, you had one more picture that I have no idea what it
Well,
is. So I will
this
just
is an example of something you might just have to pitch
No,
or
I knew you were going to say
or
that.
something. I mean, because I've got a tremendous amount of stuff. This was something my mother had, and I think it had sentimental because I grew up on a farm. We fed livestock and all that kind of stuff. And I think this reminded her of when my brother and I were small and we'd have a calf, bottle calf. And so for her, there was a lot of sentimental value to this, and there were memories attached to it. Now, I kind of, I think about mom. I think about mom when I see it. But when I was little, but are my kids going to have all those memories of that? No. So sometimes there may be something you have a lot of sentimental attachment to, and that's fine and that's good. But oftentimes it's like that song from the 80s. That sentimental attachment is going to end with you. Your kids aren't going to care what your favorite tune was, and you just kind of got to have some perspective.
They will if you sing it to them. They will always remember that.
Or they might run the other way.
That could be a double-edged sword too. I just
Sing it to Neil. He's got you. Sing it to little Neil. And I think little Neil might like the cow and the little guy with it.
He might.
Yes. Did you guys have a step 6? Let's see. Is there a step 6?
X.
Nope.
X marks the spot.
X marks the spot.
Sorry.
Yeah, X marks the spot.
I loved your quick start. You guys have any questions for them? Pop them into the chat. Let's see were there any questions for you guys. Still saying hello. Fantastic. Guys, thank you. Let's go through these steps. And they are inventorying the attic. Step 1, create an inventory. Step 2, photograph the objects and put that little label in there. Step 3, document the history of the object. Step 4, it doesn't have to be a dissertation. Step 4, preserve the object. And step 5, pass item down to family members. Jim and Michael, thanks again for such a fun, quick start. See you guys later.
Good deal.
All right. As soon as I figure out how to remove you. Bye-bye. Bye-byes. All right. Let's get ready for our second quick start. I'm so excited. Just give me 1 second. Our next special guest is very special to me. I know I've probably told this story before, but Jonathan is my superhero. You might see, a citizen archivist. I see a superhero in a cape. One day I was down at the National Archives photocopying things. I was doing a project with 150 Civil War soldiers. So that's like 80 plus pension packets. But I took it all in stride. First I started coming down there in my flip flops. Then I started coming in with some support shoes because standing at the copier for 7 hours a day is no joke. Well, at the end of one day, I went to go get my packet because they only let you have one packet at a time. And that thing was so thick that my eyes started to well up with tears because I did not think I had the strength to continue. But Jonathan was right there. He saw and he probably could feel my sadness. And he said, "Hey, I can help you out." And then started my love affair with Jonathan. He's married. But my love affair with Jonathan. Let's bring him on, our special guest, Jonathan Webb Deiss.
Hi, Shamel.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for being here today.
My
I don't
pleasure.
know if you got a chance to hear the attic, but
I did.
have you had any interesting addicts in your past before we get started with
Well,
the Kickstart?
my grandmother, who I basically we talked about genealogy all the time. She didn't have an attic. She had a small ranch house, but she did have a bunch of chest of drawers with stuff in it. And luckily, I received some of these military ID cards from my grandfather, who served in World War II and died right before I was born, and indicates that he was in military intelligence and worked on the Manhattan Project. So that has just launched me on the whole. I want to know more. What was he about? Who were his parents? What about his brothers and sisters? Who were there? What was their lives like? It just
Your life
expands
was
from there.
over. Your life
Yep.
was over. That was it.
And I was like 9, I guess.
So wait a minute. So you're another baby genealogist. You like Jim?
Yeah. And then I had a school project, and then it went on from there. Like in the 5th grade, I had a school project, and then I started building the charts and riding
I
my
need to have
bicycle.
a show with
Yeah.
just you baby genealogists, you and Jim. Like you guys started before you even hit high school. You, Jim, and Michael Strauss. Are there any other baby genealogists out there who started doing genealogy before high school? I know you're out there. Let me know about you. I'd love to hear your tale. But anyway, Jonathan, we have a lot to do today. You have in my sweet spot, which is the Civil War, on a topic that I've absolutely never thought about. And you're calling your quick start the Triumph of Muhammad Khan. So
Right.
tell me about just like why this quick start why is Muhammad Khan so special to you?
Well, I found evidence of this guy's service in the Civil War back in like 2007 or 2008, and it sort of languished in my mind for a long time. But then I was recently contacted by a production company working for PBS that wants to do a production of a show about Muslims in the United States, and so I had identified this person as somebody who followed Islam, and so they wanted to highlight his records in this show. So we kind of resurrected the records and kind of did some more exploration and found out a bunch of new things.
So I love how you explored this. Often when we know about Civil War soldiers, we kind of just stay in one area, but you really, that's why this quick start is so special. So let's take a look at the Triumph of Muhammad Khan. So step one, you said, is to be curious and follow the feeling. So what do you mean, Jonathan? Because
Well,
I follow a lot of feelings and
I
I swirl around and I end up with nothing. So what do you
so
mean?
I went back and looked at the records of what I was researching then, and I was researching someone with the last name that started with M-O. And as I scrolled through the index cards in the pension index, I came across this gentleman named Muhammad Khan. His name was spelled several different ways in the records, and so that's not a typical name you see for a Civil War soldier. So I decided to explore more.
Fantastic. So, Jonathan, so when you see something interesting, explore. So that's basically what you're saying.
Follow that vein until you hit the gold, you know.
All right, I like to hit the goal. So step two is, after you're curious, then you want to search basic military records. So
Right.
what are those?
So the first thing that I did after identifying that this person had some kind of record and was in the Civil War indicated by the pension index cards, I went ahead and pulled his compiled military service record, which is the basic record of anyone's service in the Civil War. The 90% of the soldiers that served in the Civil War have a compiled military service record. So there's a good chance that you'll find some interesting information, at least on the military side, by looking at that record. It's like step one.
Step one. So
yeah,
pension index card, from there to, okay, so let's look at
right to the service record.
Right to the service
right.
record.
So you can see the names on the card are a little unusual. That would draw anyone's attention.
Yeah.
So I was like, who is this gentleman? Who is this character? You know, so. But then from there, I just went ahead and decided to pull the service record first, which is just how I always do it. So there's a unit on that card. So I went ahead and pulled someone with that name.
So let's pause for a second, Jonathan. Yeah. So he was a Muslim, and he didn't fight like with the colored troops. He fought in white regiments.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
He did. A New York unit. Yeah.
And so the pension index cards. And what is this, Jonathan?
This is a cross-reference card, a numerical index to pensions. So if you know a certificate number or an application number, you can look up that particular number string and see what other files correspond to it. The number on Muhammad Khan's pension index card is also duplicated in other places in the pension system. And this allows you to differentiate between the different files that might have the same number for different reasons.
So Jonathan, where do you find the pension index cards that we just...
On all the the major genealogy sites like Ancestry.com, Fold3, and Family Search. You can find the pension index cards in all those places.
And this cross-reference, is this available?
This is most, you can access this most easily on Fold3.
Fantastic.
That's where I suggest you look for it.
Fold3 is your friend. Here's another one. How come this looks different? Is this the organizational?
So this is also, this is the organizational index. So it says basically he served in Company E, 43rd New York, and this allows you to see that he served in an additional unit, basically just another company in the same regiment. But they want to cover all bases. So if you're coming at it from any angle, you can cross-reference to the original file.
I'm just noticing on these organizational cards, it has law. Is that saying the pension law that they're following under?
Yeah, the law.
Oh my goodness.
The law passed by Congress that authorized the pension to be awarded or amended or updated or revised.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so collect all the cards. I just have one, and I thought I was satisfied.
Well, in a lot of cases, you are. But with this gentleman, since he served in different units, and his name was spelled in several different ways, there's several different kinds of cross references available, just to make sure you don't make a mistake and request the wrong record. That you have all the information you need to get the right record.
Yes,
despite how you might be coming at with whatever information you have. You can apply that information to cross-reference in this.
And one thing that I always say, if you get your people, when you get back to 1870 or 1860, any person of age, you should look in these pension index cards to see if they were in the Civil War, because a lot of the stories might not have passed down.
Yep.
So
So,
this is
yeah.
now we're at we know they're a soldier. So this is the compiled military service record available
Right.
also on Fold 3.
This one's not on Fold 3 yet. It will be in the future, let's hope, if they finish scanning all the service records. So it's just a matter of time before they get to New York.
So all of the service records are not on Fold 3.
Not yet. No,
Okay.
they're still in the process. It's going to be it's going to be a little while, but it's in process. So everything's getting scanned eventually. All the service records are going to be on Fold 3, at least for the Civil War era. So this one was at the National Archives, and it has index cards inside that show abstracts of his service or the term he was in the war. So these cards actually abstract original records on which there's more than one person, so they can't just put it in his in his file. They have to abstract the information about him off of that record.
I am so grateful that they did this for the military. I wish they would have done it for the sailors.
They were going to. So the War Department had plans to what they called to card. They call carding these records. And if you look at the plans they had laid out, they were going to do all of it. But World War I came around, and the clerks were needed for other things, and some political maneuvering was done to eliminate the person who was the head of this office at a particular time, and so his plans for indexing came to a screeching halt. However, we thank Ainsworth. We call this Ainsworth's system of cards, and he didn't invent the card index system, but he used it to great perfection.
So what did you learn about Muhammad Khan from these cards?
Well, it basically indicates that the government didn't know a lot about him, and he moved around a lot. So he was charged with desertion at one point, although he proves later that he was fighting the entire time, but he didn't speak English, so he couldn't be returned to his unit. He couldn't identify where he was supposed to go.
So hold on a second, Jonathan. Muhammad was in a regiment, and he would leave and go fight somewhere else.
Well, he would be sent to the hospital for some reason, or be separated from his unit and charged with desertion because he couldn't identify the unit he served with and couldn't return. So he later proved that he had been with some unit and had affidavits to prove that he had been doing his best to continue to serve in good faith, but he couldn't return to his unit because he didn't read and write English.
Wow. So, but he kept fighting.
Yeah.
So this is another card showing him being charged with desertion again.
Right. So So he during the course of the war, a lot of things happen. Men get separated from the units for many different reasons, and he was separated because of sickness. And when he was released from the hospital, he couldn't identify himself adequately to receive transportation back to the correct unit. And so he did the best he could to find a unit that would accept him and allow him to serve alongside them. He never got to the point of being fully identified, and towards the end of the war, when he rejoined his original command and was basically sort of forgiven for having been gone for so long.
Poor Muhammad, but he didn't go home. He just kept doing his duty.
He served in good faith and continued to show up. Yeah.
It says he was contraband.
He was mistaken for an escaped slave. He claims that at one point he was separated from his command, and as he tried to return, he was arrested by some officers of the provost marshal's office that assumed that because of his dark skin and dark hair that he was an African American, and so they labeled him a contraband, meaning he was an escaped slave, someone else's property.
Oh my goodness. That's why I felt it was interesting that he was fighting in white regiments. And I thought the possibility of him being fair complexion, having a fair complexion, but here it's saying real, dark,
Yeah. It's hard to
but
know what was going through their minds at the time, but we can only surmise that they assumed that he had at least one Black parent or grandparent, and that he was probably escaped from the South, and his claims of not being able to speak or understand English were false. So they put him to work as a laborer, but he always returned to the ranks at some point,
oh, and
and
he got
ended up,
out. So
yeah,
they sent him and he got out.
yeah.
Go Muhammad. Next step.
His story is
So
very
hold on.
complicated.
I think we looked at the search basic military
Right.
records. And so after you look at these military records, you say step 3 is to search the records of the adjutant general's office.
Right.
So,
So the same office that created those carded records also kept correspondence files on these
okay.
soldiers if they communicated with the War Department during or after the war about their own service. So there's an indication on his service record that there is a correspondence file for him, and indeed I found some letters that he dictated. He didn't write them, but he dictated them and had someone write them for him to send them to the War Department, where he basically says, he was mistaken for a contraband. He didn't intend to desert. It wasn't his fault. He couldn't explain who he was. He always tried to serve in good faith, and that he does provide affidavits later from officers and men that knew him saying, oh, indeed, I do remember him. He was here at this place and this time, doing a soldier's, performing a soldier's duty.
Wow. So can you tell us what the adjutant general's responsibilities were?
So the adjutant general maintained all the records of all the soldiers fighting in all the wars of the United States. They kept the service records that I showed you. They kept the correspondence files. They decided who was honorably and who wasn't honorably discharged. So they could dictate a man's fate with the scratch of a pen.
Okay.
And so the adjutant general was a very powerful agent of government during the 19th century. So since there were so many men dependent on the government for pensions and military service was important a number of times then. So he controlled the lives of many different people. He could decide their fate easily.
And Jonathan, how do we access these records? Do we have to come to DC?
At the current time, yes. The records are typically in a fragile state. There's only one single copy, and you need to refer to other records to find these. They're not well indexed. So yeah, you do need to do a little research.
And that would be the preliminary inventory?
Yeah, you do the preliminary inventory, then you pull the service records, and then once you get the basic information from the service and pension files, then you come looking for these correspondence files. Yeah.
Okay. And that's a natural step that anyone who's researching military, they should then bounce over to the adjutant general.
Yes.
I might want to do a quick start on the AGL.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee that there will be correspondence about the soldier, but there's a good chance.
Good chance. Okay. So let's move on then to step 4, which is a place I really want to learn about, which is the legislative records. So let's take a look at what you have. What is Muhammad doing in the legislative records?
He's writing letters to Congress, basically saying, I need more money for my pension. I'm destitute. I need your help, securing a pension for myself or increasing my rate once I get one. He wrote in like a number of times, at least half a dozen times. A bill to increase his pension or give him a pension in the first place came before Congress a number of times. And so I was able to find correspondence that he sent in and his lawyer sent in, basically asking for relief, which was not uncommon at all during this era. A lot of people could communicate adequately with the government, so they went to their congressmen and asked their congressmen to intervene on their behalf to communicate directly with these different federal agencies that might have been difficult to access.
So, Jonathan, where do you access these? Are these something you have to go to DC for as well?
Yes, these records are only in the District of Columbia. They're at the headquarters of the National Archives, 700 Pennsylvania Avenue. They're in the Legislative Archives, which is technically a separate division within the National Archives. So Congress still controls all of its records, and so, but they're maintained and curated at the National Archives by National Archives personnel. So it's an interesting partnership they have. But you can go access them, you know, at the what we call Archives A1 downtown. Yeah.
And so, Jonathan, for these I noticed that looking at pension packets, I see lots of correspondence in there. And so, would this legislative correspondence or these AGO correspondence already be in the pension packet?
Sometimes they are, and sometimes vice versa. So in Khan's case, he went to Congress. Then Congress wrote to the Adjutant General. The Adjutant General wrote back. Khan wrote to the Adjutant General. They all started talking to one another. They couldn't figure out what to do, and then they eventually, eventually enough evidence surfaced for the Secretary of War to say enough's enough, give him a pension. So you can see the paper trail went back and forth and back and forth. So some letters he submitted to Congress end up in his AGO correspondence file.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
so there's a crossover there, and you'll never get the whole story unless you look at all of them.
Okay, so don't
Yeah.
expect all of the correspondence that's going back and forth to be in the pension packet, even though it's a lot of stuff in there. It's not everything.
Yeah, I can guarantee there's always something more.
All right. So are you telling me there was a whole bill about Muhammad and his pension?
A number of times, yeah. They presented bills on his behalf, basically to give him what they call relief, a number of times, and it never passed. Eventually, the Secretary of War, like I said, had to intervene and basically make a judgment to give him a pension. But
oh, hold on, I think I blew that up. I forgot I blew that up. So multiple times. So Jonathan, if I'm interested in trying to see if, you know, any of my Civil War soldiers might be in any of these bills, I have to come to DC to do this.
Well, if you've already taken the opportunity to look at a Civil War pension for yourself, you will see that there might be correspondence in the pension packet with Congress already. So you can backtrack that. You can go to you can go to a legislative archivist and show them a copy of the record that you think might connect legislative records to the pension, and they can backtrack it. You can also ask to see records of different committees: the Committee on Pensions, the Committee on Invalid Pensions, the Committee on Military Affairs, for both houses of Congress, the Senate and for both parts of Congress, the Senate and the House. So the different committees might have papers. Different congressmen might also have their own different collections of papers. So you'd have to see if there's a collection of congressmen's papers outside the National Archives, because they don't collect them that way. So there's a couple different ways to approach it, but there are some indexes as well, but they're not complete. So sometimes you can look in the congressional record, congressional record, and see if a bill came up. If it usually says a bill was granted, and that might be only like one sentence in the congressional record, you can often take the bill number and go to a legislative archivist and say, where did this start?
Okay.
And they can go backwards and backtrack and find the different committee papers where they discussed it and went back and forth. And some eventually, like they'll go back to, you'll eventually find the original petition where a citizen or an organization says, we want X, Y, and Z, please write a bill just to fix this problem for us.
So, and there's no way to scale the legislative records from home?
You can search some of the printed congressional record. So for bills that were voted on and complete, the thing is, if the bill wasn't turned into a law, there's not going to be much information in the congressional record.
Okay.
But for later periods of time, there's a committee hearing record, committee hearing testimony and things like that. For the early period, not so much. But if you go on site at the National Archives, you can actually pull the original committee papers and see what they were talking about. It's a very valuable resource. But you can start, but you can start from home. You can also search the newspapers to see if it states that a particular veteran living in that area finally received his pension from Congress after X number of years. So there's all kinds of little, yeah. So then you figure, okay, well, what year is this? Okay, what term of Congress is that? Okay, what state's he from? Okay, who are his representatives? Okay, what committees did they sit on? And then you can like figure out, okay, how do I want to attack this? This guy was on 5 committees, one of which is Committee on Pensions.
Yes.
Oh, that's why he went to this guy. So you look there and see if there might be some record of him writing a letter to Congress. So
All right. So you're looking for clues that are going to point
Yeah.
me in there. I love it. So, Jonathan, you do something in step 5 that I love is to create a chronology. Let me show them what
Right.
you did and you can tell us about it.
So it's kind of hard to read on the screen, but basically I just went through and abstracted the records I found in his, his service record and anything he might have said about himself in his pension. So I just put him in a chronological abstract, and then you can actually see where he was at any given time, what he was doing, what he wasn't doing, what was possible and what was impossible. Certainly a person can't be in 2 places at once. So this would be a way to eliminate the fact that you might be looking at 2 men with the same name.
Yes.
Are you getting 2 guys mixed up? Are you conflating things? Are you making the story go off in a different direction because you're not looking at the right guy? So doing the chronology is very important, especially for a military research, because a lot of soldiers say I was in a particular battle. Well, you do the chronology on them and you realize, no, they were at home on furlough, or he was in the hospital very sick, or he ran away, or indeed he was present. We just don't know. We don't know if he was on the front line because the records don't go that deep. But we do know, like it'll say, yes, he had no absences during this period. So
I love that in the compiled military service record.
Right,
love
right,
that.
Right.
All right, Jonathan, and then you have a lovely step 6 is to analyze and to summarize. And you, Jonathan, what a blessing to be able to, one, how did you find this?
So the gravestone that was provided to me by the production staff of the Timestamp Media, who I worked with on their production for the Muslims in the Civil War episode. They went to his gravesite and sent that to me. I'd only seen it on Find a Grave, so the copy wasn't that great, but it was really nice to see that evidence that the government acknowledged him in his lifetime and gave him a soldier's grave.
Nice.
There's no surviving photo of him that we know of.
And this is you on the set, huh?
So yeah, we filmed a couple of months ago at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. We did a early morning shoot to highlight Khan's career. That's actually Khan's record on the table.
Nice.
And me sort of mansplaining to the host about the record and showing her some.
Which record is that specifically? Is that
that's the pension file of Muhammad Khan. Yeah, his actual pension file.
Wow, congratulations on that. Of course, you're not going to tell us when it's available or anything. We'll check it out.
I don't know. I was just one of the talking heads. So
yes,
yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we look forward to seeing that. Jonathan, thank you for a fantastic quick start. Let me run through the steps. And the steps for the Triumph of Mohammad Khan. Be curious, follow the feeling. Step 2, search basic military records. Step 3 is then to search the records of the AGO. Step 4 is to search legislative records. Step 5, create a chronology of what you found. Step 6, analyze and summarize. And and that's it. And let me just tell you, Jonathan is with Reclaim the Records. He is one of our genealogy vigilantes. So I say, that's what I call them, because they are standing up for us and making sure that when municipalities are supposed to turn over the records, they do. So Jonathan, thank you so much for that quick start. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Jonathan, they are very excited. They loved everything. Jim Beidler, thank you so much for not putting that wedding dress at the yard sale. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic time looking for your ancestors.